43 doctors failed to save the billionaire's daughter, until the janitor's son did the impossible. The hospital in the heart of the city glimmered with a cold, sterile light, the kind of light that seemed to drain warmth from everything it touched. Hallways echoed with the soft hum of machines and the quiet shuffle of nurses' shoes across the polished floors. Yet in one of the rooms on the upper floor, an unconscious girl lay in a hospital bed, her world shrouded in darkness. Her name was Clara Montrose, the only daughter of Henry Montrose, a powerful businessman whose empire stretched across industries and continents. For 6 long weeks, Clara had not opened her eyes. Doctors from all over the world, neurologists, cardiologists, psychiatrists, had examined her thoroughly. Every test came back perfect. Every scan showed no anomaly. Yet her body remained trapped in a limbo between life and death. Henry Montrose was a man accustomed to control. He controlled companies, boardrooms, and even the minutiae of his daughter's life. Yet now, as he stood by the large window overlooking the bustling city, he realized that control had limits. Here, in this room filled with monitors and sterile machines, he could do nothing. No money, no influence, no connections could force life back into his daughter. Just wait for a miracle, the doctors had murmured with weary voices. Outside the room, down the long, white corridors, a woman swept silently, moving from room to room with practiced ease. Her name was Sophia, and she was the hospital's cleaner. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors and pushing carts, and her eyes carried the weight of quiet fatigue. Yet even in this sterile world, she radiated a different kind of strength, a strength born not from power, but from resilience. Every evening, Sophia's son, a thin, serious boy named Eli, waited for her in the hallway. He carried a small backpack, worn at the corners, and a notebook frayed from constant use. He would sit quietly, drawing airplanes, little trains, and ships in motion. Sometimes he listened to the doctor's whispered conversations. Nothing's changing, just wait for a miracle. Eli had heard the word so many times that it etched itself into his mind. He remembered how his mother once told him, sometimes the soul can pull the body from darkness if someone truly believes. He didn't know exactly what it meant, but he felt it like a spark inside him, a small light that refused to be extinguished. That night, the city streets outside the hospital glowed under the amber lights. Inside, the corridors were quiet, save for the faint beeping of machines in the rooms that lined the hallways. Sophia had fallen asleep in the small chair beside Clara's bed, her hands resting on her lap. Eli watched her for a moment, careful not to disturb her rest. Then he quietly rose from a spot on the floor. In his hands, he held an old book, worn and fragile, with pages yellowed by age. It had belonged to his grandmother, and in it were stories about the breath of life, about the unseen connection between soul and body. The corridors were empty, save for the distant sound of Janitor's mop clattering in a far corner. Eli stepped into the room where Clara lay. Her skin looked almost translucent under the harsh white lights, and her chest barely moved with each shallow breath. The boy placed the book gently on the nightstand and knelt beside her bed. He reached out, placing his small hand lightly on her chest. "Please don't leave," he whispered. He began to breathe steadily, deliberately, matching the rhythm of her faint breath. He remembered his grandmother's words. Don't command life. Call it. He wasn't sure what it meant, but he knew he had to try. So he whispered, not a prayer, not a spell, but a simple plea, sincere and pure. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Eli's hand trembled slightly, his heart racing. But he did not give up. He closed his eyes and concentrated on the life he knew still lingered somewhere inside Clara. And then he felt it, a small tremor under his palm. Her skin quivered. The monitor beeped irregularly. The line that had been flat for weeks quivered, then surged. Eli's heart leapt as he saw the pulse strengthen, ever so slightly. And then Clara drew a short, shallow breath, the first in 6 long weeks. The sound drew the attention of the hospital staff. Doctors and nurses rushed in, faces pale with shock and disbelief. Machines that had been silent now hummed steadily, displaying stable readings. And then, slowly, Clara's eyelids fluttered, revealing bright, searching eyes. She looked around the room, confused, and then her gaze rested on Eli. The boy lowered his head, trying to hide the tears of relief that had welled in his eyes. What did you do?" a nurse asked, her voice trembling. I just helped her remember how to live," Eli said softly. Days passed. Clara's recovery was miraculous. She could sit by the window, watch the sunrise, and breathe as if she were seeing the world for the first time. Henry Montrose, who had once been a man driven by power and pride, was changed. He looked at Eli and Sophia with quiet awe and gratitude, realizing that their courage and belief had achieved what his money and connections could not. He summoned them to his mansion, offering them wealth, comfort, and opportunities beyond their wildest dreams. But Eli refused. "I don't need it," he said firmly. "The main thing is that people should not stop believing, even if they're not doctors." One morning, as Clara rested her hand lightly on the windowsill, she spoke softly, her voice filled with wonder. "I heard your voice," she said, her eyes shining. "There, where it was dark, you called me." Eli smiled faintly. In that moment, the hospital, which had once been cold and lifeless, seemed to glow with warmth. The walls themselves seemed to absorb the hope and belief that had entered the room that night. Even the hospital director, a man known for his strict routines and skepticism, paused to reflect. "Sometimes even 40 doctors cannot do what one pure heart can," he said quietly, and for the first time, the sterile hospital felt alive with light. Weeks turned into months, and Clara's life returned to something like normal. She returned to school, her laughter echoing to the halls like music that had been lost and found. Henry Montrose had become a gentler man, one who no longer measured love and care in numbers or achievements. Eli continued to visit the hospital, but now with different eyes. Where he had once seen only machines and white walls, he saw hope. He tutored children in the corridors, helped the sick feel less alone, and continued to live quietly with his mother. Sophia had taken position as a hospital volunteer, cleaning still, yes, but also tending to the small joys of the patients, a warm cup of tea, a reassuring hand, a kind word. One evening, Henry Montrose invited Eli to his office, a room full of marble, glass, and opulence. He gestured to a large envelope on the desk. "This is for you," Henry said gently. "For everything you've done, for saving my daughter." Eli shook his head. "I said I don't need it," he replied. "The only thing I need is that people continue to believe in the power of the heart." Henry studied him silently, a faint smile touching his lips. He realized that no money could ever replace the courage and purity of Eli's spirit. And in the hospital, where once machines and cold light dominated, warmth now lingered. Nurses whispered to one another about the boy who had called life back with nothing but faith. Doctors, humbled by the event, spoke in awe about how sometimes science alone cannot explain the miracles that arise from belief. Clara would often visit Eli and Sophia, bringing small gifts she had drawn or made herself, sharing stories of her days filled with color and laughter. And every time she saw Eli, she remembered the night when someone's pure heart had reached through darkness and called her back to life. "I'll never forget," Clara would say, her eyes glistening. "You saved me, not with medicine, not with anything, but with hope." And Eli, smiling, would simply reply, "Hope is all we need." From that day on, the Montrose family's lives were changed forever. The world had reminded them that the truest power is not wealth, knowledge, or influence. It is a quiet, unwavering belief in life, in people, and in miracles. Even the city itself seemed to notice. People who walked past the hospital spoke of it in whispers, saying the building itself had changed. The air inside felt lighter, softer, warmer. Those who entered sometimes left a feeling they could not describe, a feeling of possibility, of hope, of life. And somewhere in the heart of it all sat Eli and Sophia, quietly knowing that they had seen and created a miracle, not through medicine, not through science, but through the enduring power of faith.